Hello friends and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is episode 2 of my beginner series, and today we're talking about sketching. And this is one of the most important things to understand in Fusion 360, because every single 3D model starts with a sketch, and once this sketching clicks, everything else becomes much easier. So don't worry, we're gonna keep everything simple, no engineering talk, no fancy tools, just sketch tools you actually need to start designing your own 3D printable part. So let's jump into Fusion 360 and we start with the basics. So what is a sketch? To keep the idea simple, a sketch is a 2D drawing that tells Fusion 360 what shapes you want before you turn it into a 3D object. Think of a sketch like a drawing on a piece of paper, or maybe a blueprint of a building. This is not designing 3D yet, you're not doing any engineering, you're just drawing shapes on a piece of virtual paper. So let's start with a sketch and show you exactly what we mean by that. To start a sketch, you're just gonna go to this button called Create a Sketch. And if you hover your mouse for a second on the sketch, Fusion 360 actually tells you what a sketch is. So a sketch is a geometric profile that defines the foundation of a design. So as soon as you click on a sketch, Fusion 360 will ask you where you want to create that sketch. Now, a sketch can be built on any of these planes or even on a flat surface if you already have an object. So let's click onto this plane, and like I said in the last episode, as soon as you click a sketch, your sketch menu appears here and all your buttons change. And these buttons are most of the tools that you will need to create a successful sketch. So let's have a look at what kind of buttons we have and how they work briefly. Starting with the first section of buttons, and this is the create section. So if you click this menu, you will have a lot of tools to use in your sketch. Now these are the create and these are the modify tools. And what you do with this section, you modify the lines that you've already created in your sketch. The next sections are constraints. But for beginners, I would not recommend to start looking into these ones, just because it becomes very complicated very quickly. And to be fair, if you're a beginner and you don't want to do a college course, or you just want to do something very simple for your home, like a hook to hang your headphones, let's say, you don't really need to use constraints. You use more logic than constraints. These tools are more for engineering purposes, and it gets very complicated. Don't worry about them. Just let's focus on create and modify. These are our main tools that we're going to use in Sketch today. And you see the whole profile turns into a view with grids. So every grid, if you zoom in and out, it will start dividing into different smaller grids. What these grids mean is that every grid, it will have a snap measurement to it. So you can also see the measurements here in millimeters. So this is 50, this is 25. So let's start with the first tool and one of the most common. Let's start with a line. So let's take a line and see how that works. We need to start with a point, so we're going to choose a point. We click the center point and we go up to here. You will have a 25mm line. If you go up to here, you will have a 50mm line. And let's say you don't want to have a 25, you want to have 37. You just type in 37mm, and that's your 37mm locked in. Now, if we move our mouse towards left and right, you can see the angles changing. Fusion 360 also has like snap for angles. So if you go to 45, it'll kind of snap into 45 degrees. If you go to 0, it will snap into 0, 180, and so on, so forth. So that's how you make a line that is a certain dimension and a certain angle towards your starting point. So let's say you want an angle of 37 degrees as well. Tab on our keyboard and you can switch to your degrees, and there you just type 37 degrees, and that's your 37 degrees line at 37 millimeters length. And that's a simple line to create, and just by adding and stacking other lines, you just create shapes from that. Now remember, whenever you create a profile, which is something that's enclosed, so we start with a line from this point, we go there, we start from that point, we go there, and we keep going. No matter what kind of profile you want to make, in order for that thing to become a profile, it will have to be closed. If you can't hover over it and get it highlighted, that means most likely somewhere is not closed. So let's delete this line. As soon as I delete this line, this profile stops becoming a profile and just becomes a sketch. Let's go to the next tool. We're going to delete everything on this sketch, and we'll look at the 2-point rectangle. Now, as soon as you click 2-point rectangle, you'll see the feature options in 2-point rectangle, and you can get a normal 2-point rectangle that starts from one corner and goes to the other corner. Here you can just type in your measurements, so let's say 50 millimeters by, again, tab and 50 millimeters, and hit enter. You have a 50 millimeter square. Now let's control that one as well. So we cancel that. You can also have 3-point rectangle. So you can go to 1 point, select your 1 point, and then select your 3rd point, and that's your 3-point rectangle. I've never used this in my life, so I don't see the point of it, but maybe it's useful for somebody. I don't know. The one that I always tend to use is the center rectangle. So if you click center rectangle, you start from the center point and you click once, and then you start dragging, and it will make you a rectangle starting from the middle point. Now this is quite useful if you want to have more things on your sketch that start from your middle point. So let's say you start with a 50 by 50 millimeters, and then you can start exactly from the same point with a circle. You have few points to snap your designs on. So that's 2-point rectangle. This is very simple to understand. Like I said in the first video, just play with those tools and start creating a few things and see how it feels like. I know I said this before, and I will keep saying, designing in Fusion 360 and especially sketching in Fusion 360, it's very, very, very simple. If you can draw on a piece of paper, you can design in Fusion 360. So the next tool is the circle. Very self-explanatory. You have features options here. You can set 2-point, 3-point, tangent circle. A tangent circle is when you have a line and then you want to start your circle. Let's have 2 lines. So let's say you want a circle that is tangent to these 2 lines. You take your circle tool and then you get your 2 tangent circle, and then you start from select that line and select that line, and when you drag, it will always follow that those 2 lines. Now again, these are more advanced tools, but if you just want to play around, just take a simple circle and just make circles, and that's your circle tool. Now I'm going to take a moment here, guys, to remind you that if you like this video and if you like this type of content, please give me a like and subscribe. This really helps my channel grow, and it really helps me make more tutorials and more interesting videos on YouTube. Now, this next tool is called a feed point spline. This is a very cool tool to use in your design, especially if you want to design something that is not perfectly geometric. So something that has a bit more natural flow to it, something that has a bit more organic feel. So this feed point spline is actually a very cool tool to learn to use in your modeling. So we're gonna start like any other line from a point, and we're gonna start dragging towards another point. As soon as you click another point, it will create a line. But when you start moving, you'll see that line starts changing. So let's create another point here and then say enter. So one of the things that you can see onto this, you get these green lines that cross your point. And these are the tools that you can use to change your radius of that curvature. So let's say we take this point, and if you drag up onto that, you'll see the curvature of that turn changes. So if you go up and down, it'll make it like a very wide circle. It's also represented by that green circle, this one here. So when you change your dimensions, it will change the circle. Also, if you start dragging left and right, it will change your shape. You can also just take this point and move it somewhere, and you can do the same with these other points. So we can change that, we can change this, and we can make a whole bunch of things with these lines. So I would just do that, and the reason I'm just doing this at the moment is because I want to show you the rest of the tools. So you can just play with these, just get a few shapes in place, and maybe, I don't know, do something with this. That looks like half of a violin, maybe like a half of a guitar. That looks like a half of a guitar. Okay, let's make a guitar then. So you can play with these ones. You can just adjust your tools, you can adjust your points, and just get a feel for what everything does. So let's say that's half of my guitar, and I want to create the other half onto this side. And to show you our next tool, we're going to take a straight line, and we're going to start from this point, and we're going to go up to this point. So now we have a symmetry line. So if we take the next tool called the mirror, we can just select it, and we'll have another menu here that's asking us for a couple of things. First one is going to be an object. So let's select an object. In our case, it's going to be this line. And then let's select a mirror line, and in our case it's going to be this one. And as soon as we click it, you'll see the same thing that's on this side appears on the other side, like a mirror. Now that we have the whole shape mirrored, we can just simply delete this line, and that's your shape done. Now I want to show you another very cool tool, and I'm going to go random through them. Our next tool is going to be offset. So let's click offset and see what this does. Again, if you keep hovering, it will tell you what the tool actually does. And I'll show you in this case. I'm going to select this line, and I'm going to also select this line. And as soon as you select both of them, you see there's an arrow. Now this arrow points you to where the positive numbers go. So if we type, let's say 5 millimeters, you see it will go 5 millimeters towards where the arrow points. If we type -5 millimeters, it will go onto the outside. So that arrow tells you which way the offset will go. And the offset, like I said, it's a pretty simple concept. It takes a line and offset it. In our case, it's a closed loop, so we'll offset a closed loop. If you have a simple line, let's say like this, and you choose offset, it will create an exact line offset to that at a certain distance. So let's say 10 millimeters, it will create an offset line of at 10 millimeters. So let's say we create a clay cutter. We're gonna select both of these lines by holding shift, and we're gonna just offset everything. And because it shows me that if I offset by 0.45, which is my default line width when I design things, I will have to put minus 0.45 to design a line on the outside of this. And I'm going to say OK to that. Now, as soon as I did that, you'll see there's another perimeter around my shape that I can later on extrude and turn it into a cutter. And let's do that for a second, just for the sake of it. Let's finish the sketch and go to this button called extrude and click on it. You'll get an arrow that shows you the direction of the extrusion, and let's say we extrude that by 19 millimeters. And now technically you have a shape that you can cut stuff with. But this shape is not a solid shape. So if we print this, it's going to be very, very flimsy. It will lose its shape when we try to handle it, and it's not going to be quite strong enough to be useful. So let's press Ctrl Z and go back into the sketch. And for that, we need to do a few more extrusions. So I usually do this when I create a clay cutter. I'll take the line again, and then you can offset that line as many times as you want. And I will offset this by 0.90, which is double the size of my line width. So I'll keep everything in the same line width. And because again, my arrow shows me inside, that will make my offset onto the inside. I wanted to do minus 0.90 so that it will create the offset on the outside. I'm going to press enter now, and I have two lines, one that's going to be my cutting edge and one that's going to be my reinforcement wall. Now I need to do one more line that's going to give me something to grip onto that clay cutter. So I'm going to take this line again. I'm going to select both of them by holding shift and click, and I'm going to offset everything by 3 millimeters, and that's going to give me a reinforcement wall to hold the cutter from. So I can just finish sketch now, and you see in my sketch I have 3 profiles. I also have another folder here that says sketches, and I can simply make my sketch visible and invisible if you want to. And all my sketches, when I create new sketches, they will be stored into this sketches folder. Now I don't have anything on my, I don't have a body yet, I only have the origin. So I can simply select one of these profiles and press E on my keyboard, that means extrude, and then I can extrude that by 19 millimeters. And you see, this is one of the things that Fusion does. I don't really know why. As soon as you extrude your first profile from the sketch becomes invisible. Now there might be a way to turn that feature off. I don't know. I just got used to it. So I'm just gonna make my sketch visible again and go back to the second line, and I'm gonna select the second profile that I've created in my sketch. I'm gonna extrude this by 60 millimeters to give myself an reinforcement wall, and I'm gonna select this third profile and I'm gonna extrude this by 3 millimeters to give myself something to hold on to. So that's my first clay cutter done on a very strange looking profile. Now I've only extruded this to show you another feature of the sketch. So if you go back and double click the sketch, you can edit this sketch. And let's say you don't like this shape that this cutter has and you want to turn it into something different. You can simply click one of the points and you can do whatever you've done before to it, and it will change everything that you've done so far. So let's take this point and move it up a bit. You'll see all of those profiles that we've done already, they get changed. So if we turn this around, that becomes into a different shape. And if we say finish sketch, your whole object is changed already. So that's one way to modify your things. And let's say if you look at something and it's not exactly how you like, just simply go back to your sketch and modify whatever you want and whatever you need, and it will modify your object. Now, because you use mirror, it won't use both of them. You're gonna have to go and modify every one of them if you want to create a different one. So let's say within a sketch you have a different shape. Now let's say you finish this sketch and you want to create another one. You can just simply create another sketch and go and choose another profile, and then you can create a sketch onto that profile. So you can create as many sketches as you want. You can make them visible and invisible, and then you can just play around with them. You also have a finish sketch button here. You have a finish sketch button here. Let's delete these ones because we don't need them anymore. We just want to jump into the next tools of the sketch. So we're just going to delete everything, and we're going to start with a fresh new sketch, and we're going to choose the top again. Now I want to talk to you about some of these tools, some of these modify tools of the sketch, and I want to show you a few functionalities. So we talked about the offset tool already, and let's take a rectangle and I'll show you some other tools. So let's look at the fillet, and the way the fillet works, if you read, it says it places an arc of a specific radius at the intersection of two lines or arcs. So let's say we have these two lines and we want to create a perfect radius here. We're just going to select the fillet tool, and we're going to select this line, and we're going to select this line, and that's your arc. Now you can type in how many millimeters radius you want. So let's say I want 20 millimeters or I want 2 millimeters. It will adjust accordingly. So again, if you finish this sketch and extrude this by 50 millimeters, let's say, you have a box with a rounded corner, and you think about, oh, I forgot to do the other corners. Just go back to sketch and then take your fillet again and do the same things you did to the other corners. And once you set a size for your radius, you can simply, without clicking enter or escape, you just simply go to the next lines, and it will copy the same measurements onto every single corner that you want to do. And when you finish sketch, that will be translated to your object. Okay, so let's say you have we're just gonna go Control Z way back. Let's say you have different shape. Okay, you can use this fillet on any two lines, and you can just keep going and making things not sharp, let's say. So you can just keep going to any two lines, and it will create whatever radius you want. So that's your fillet tool. And I want to show you the trim tool as well, because this is also a quite important tool that I use quite a lot in my workflow. So let's say I end up with something that it needs trimming. I'll just take my trim tool, and instead of selecting the whole line to cut, it will select only a segment. So I can just trim this bit, or I can just trim this bit, or I can just trim the inside of this. Now, if I don't have the trim tool and I select the line, it will delete the entire line. But if I have the trim tool, I can just trim the insides of these to make it look like a profile. So that's simply the trim tool. There's one thing that the trim tool can really do nicely. So let's say we have a bunch of lines that we want to trim. When I take the trim tool and I click somewhere and hold click, there's a little square that appears next to my mouse. That means my trim tool is activated, and everywhere that square goes, it will trim those lines without releasing the mouse. So I can just simply delete these without actually selecting each one of them. So that's how that trim tool works. Again, you don't really need to know all the tools into this menu. Just explore some of them and see how they work. We talked about the mirror. These two tools, the circular pattern and rectangle pattern, are also very good tools to learn and play with. The circular pattern works like this. Let's say we create a circle somewhere here, and then we just go create a circular pattern, and it's going to ask us about the object. We're going to select this object. It's going to ask about the center point, and we're going to choose this center point. And by default, it will always give you 3 iterations of that object that you selected, and then you can change to 8 or 15 or whatever you want to, how many you want to do. And that will create you that circular pattern of different objects. Now you can have everything that you want into this. You can create a simple line and then say I want the circular pattern of that line, and you can select that line, and then you can just go to the center point this, and you can have 35 of those lines. So it will always create you circular pattern regarding that line. The next thing I want to show you is your rectangular pattern. So let's create a small square, 20 by 20, and if you want to create rectangle pattern, you can choose either way. You can go that way, and again it will create 3 of them, and you can say I want 8, and I want them a bit more spaced out. And you can also go and create a set upwards, and it will create you a grid. So let's delete this and look at one more thing that we can do, which is really helpful, is your text. So the text function in Fusion 360 works like this. You select your text, and it will ask you what type of text you want. You want a straight text, or you want the text to follow a path. Now you can play with this whenever you want. At the moment, I'm just going to choose normal text, and you have to choose a point and then drag and then choose a second point. So it'll make you like a virtual frame of where you want to put your text in. And then you can type here test of text, and this is how you can create extruded texts onto objects. You can choose whatever font you want. You can choose the height of the text. So let's say I want a text of 70 millimeters high. That's how big it's going to be. And if I want a 1020, that's going to be not 220. So if I want a 20 millimeter height text, that's the 20. You can align it in the middle of your virtual frame, and then once you click OK and finish sketch, you can simply take this text sketch and then extrude this by, let's say, whatever you want to extrude it by. So now, because everything is independent, all these letters are independent, you will have created as many bodies as you have letters. So this is the sketch function in Fusion 360. Like I said before, this is one of the most important things that you can play around with and learn. Take your tools, open Fusion 360 and play with them. Because until you play with something, until you use those tools, and until you play around with those tools, you will never understand. Doesn't matter how many videos you watch, it's going to be very hard for you to understand how everything works until you play with them. So this is everything I want to teach you, and I want to show you about sketching. There's obviously way more tools that you can play with. There's way more things that you can learn, but this is, I think, a solid start that you can take in your 3D design arsenal. In the next episode, we're going to be looking more in depth at things to extrude and other options. So we're going to look at the extrusion, and we're going to look at some modifiers that can make things look very interesting. So thank you again for watching, and until the next episode, happy printing.